Yeah, I was actually talking to a couple ex-Wall Street traders this week. One of them being Dan Moorhead of Pantera Capital, and they both said a few things that were quite interesting. First of all, Dan was the first to say that the guy that sat next to me at Goldman Sachs was, Steve Mnuchin, who became the Treasury Secretary. And so to not assume that Wall Street and the Treasury are a revolving door is naive. He also, or another guest mentioned that the truth is, if you're a fund manager, and you see Bitcoin becoming an asset that's appreciating, and you don't get in on it, then your competing fund manager is going to get on it, and you're out of a job. And so there seems to be real wealth getting in on this. If J.P. Morgan's putting funds in there and client assets, and Goldman Sachs is, those same guys at the Fed are probably not going to shut the door on them because it is part of their business. And so you have to remember, at the end of the day, it is a little about fear and greed. These funds potentially want in because they need to beat the S&P 500, right? They need to beat the returns. And sometimes it is that simple. And sometimes it's not that simple, Scott. But I think some people need to realize sometimes it is that simple.
Some great points you just made there and things I talk about all the time. One is that Paul Tudor Jones and Stanley Druckenmiller and Bill Miller and all these billionaires who are now proponents for Bitcoin don't make that decision without knowing it's not going to get banned. I'm sorry, these guys are not going all in, in the media on Bitcoin without calling someone first to make sure that they're not going to be on the wrong side of regulation. So that's one, and you touched on that. The other is a very interesting shift that I think we've seen in the past 2 years that you also just mentioned, which is I think there was huge reputational risk to supporting Bitcoin or cryptocurrency in the boardroom until last year. I think even if you loved it as a risk manager, as a portfolio manager, you were going to be nuts if you threw it out on the table and said, I want exposure to this, right? You didn't want to be first. I think that's flipped, as you said. I think now there's reputational risk to not understanding the asset or at least having a plan. So I think even the people we haven't seen come in yet, the endowments, pensions, sovereign wealth funds, who, by the way, they come with an ETF, right? Their risk managers have been doing diligence on this for 2 years. They're waiting for an instrument to be able to gain exposure and can't right now. So if they're coming in, maybe that's the catalyst. But all of that aside, now your clients are asking, everyone's asking about it. Everyone wants exposure. JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon said that it's basically the worst asset that's ever been created. If anyone in his firm even trades it on their own time, he's firing them. And now JP Morgan every day filing for a new ETF, starting a new fund. Wealthy clients can gain access because he has to. He hates it, but he has to, right? And so I think that that's exactly right, is that now the reputational risk is on the other side and you have to open the doors or you're going to get left behind.
Yeah, when your customers are asking, you
tell them no?
Yeah, exactly. If you tell them no, someone else will tell them yes. And that's the funny thing. It ultimately comes down to demand. This is an asset that's now proven itself, and like you said, whereas maybe even as much as 18 months ago, you couldn't come out. There were no public CEOs doing it. Michael Saylor really took the jump on that. Obviously, Elon followed. Coinbase today, when will we see? Before end of year? Before Amazon and Google and Apple put some? Maybe, maybe not, but it seems to be trending that way. And now it's probably not going to stop. And like you said, somebody made a phone call. And if somebody shuts them down in the Fed, there'll be a phone call made to the Fed. And maybe there'll be someone out of a job. I'm not saying it's like that, but I am saying it's closer than you think. And so I think this market is moving there. We do see the news cycles, the regulation. Just to finish up on the news, and then I want to start asking you about a couple of coins. Based on the news being a lagging indicator, in your opinion, should people ignore it? Also, people can't ignore it, Scott, and it gets in their head sometimes. And you always think the infrastructure bill and China and El Salvador, and it has a way of getting in your head more than even a price level on a chart.
Yeah, and I think all those things are good news, right? And that's the thing. It depends on the interpretation where you're getting it. So maybe, and this is probably good advice in general, don't just take their word for it. Do a bit of research on your own, DYOR, as we say. Do your own research. See if what they're talking about is true. China, you just mentioned, is the best example. The most bearish case that most people made for Bitcoin until a few months ago was that China dominated and that Bitcoin mining and Bitcoin control was centralized in China, right? China could dominate the network. They could control it. They could attack the network, most mining. So then they announce a ban on mining. Miners start to leave China, and apparently that becomes the bad news. Is that the network's going to be more decentralized? It's going to be cleaner, but China's banning it. We better sell it, right? So they're again, it's two sides of the same coin, of the same narrative. Bitcoin leaving China is good news. Anything leaving China is good news, right? In general, they have a very closed economy. They ban Google, they ban Facebook. They would have banned the internet if they could, and they create their own versions. They're creating a central bank digital currency in China, their own digital currency. But so again, you read the news. If you're reading it when price was on the way down, there's terrible news about China. If you read it while price was on the way up, we need to decentralize the network and get Bitcoin mining out of China.